Good evening, coaches, and everyone else that has registered and has come into our Intune with Coaching webinar tonight. Welcome to our final 2021 webinar. Now, that doesn't mean to say that we're going anywhere. All we are saying is that we're taking a well-earned break. It's been a very challenging year for all of us, you included. So we're all going to have a break, and then we're going to come back with a vengeance in February 2022. Oh, gosh. Excuse that. I am sorry about that. Anyway, so now, you know that Sean and I have been spending a lot of time in the UK. And that's because we've been setting up a whole system. We've been getting to know different international people. And so next year could be quite interesting. We are looking at some interesting people coming onto our webinar and to basically turn it very international. But enough of that. We have noted that a lot of schools are already on a break. Now, you were to have gone on the break on holiday next week. But due to this fourth wave, everybody is now on the break now. So you're all a week extra holiday. Now, talking about COVID, Sean, together with his sister, his brother-in-law, and his two nephews, all are at home with COVID. All 5 of them are at home with COVID, yeah. Now, fortunately, all but one are vaccinated. The teenagers had 1 vaccination. The youngest he's too young to have the vaccine, but the rest have been double vaccinated. So I'm pleased to say that it's actually been quite an easy COVID experience. Look, they've all had their different symptoms and that, but Sean can speak to us when he comes on. He can tell us how he's feeling. But yes, now that brings me on to why we are having this webinar tonight. You know, for the last year, we have been extremely lucky to have the most amazing and wonderful guests that are experts in their field, guests that, you know, we've had different sporting codes. We've had every topic that is related to sport, we've had a guest on. Now, they are specialized in what they specifically do, and we don't have time to become experts in everything. So gain the knowledge from everybody else. And over this year, we've had a lot of people saying, we put out our little inserts after every webinar. A lot of people have come back and said, oh, I've forgotten about that, or what did that person say about this? And so we decided, and we're going to do it in next year as well, about every quarter. It's always very valuable to have a recap and to take the most interesting snippets and just refresh us all again. None of us is perfect. We all forget. So that's the purpose of tonight. So what we have done is we've taken 12 guests. One of them we've never heard before because it's been on another platform that we run. But we've got 12 guests, and we've just taken certain highlights from their presentations. And we're going to basically show it to you, and then Sean and I will chat about it. But you are all welcome to put your questions forward. Anything that you want to know, please let us know. So I see Sean has joined us. So Sean, do you want to say anything? Welcome, everybody.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. And yes, Cass, it's been a fantastic year. We've had a lot of very, very good speakers on our various webinars. And I know we're only showing 12 people, but a lot of it doesn't mean that just because we're showing 12 webinars or 12 webinar or extracts from certain webinars, it doesn't mean that the others weren't just as important. We just decided that we will look at these kind of webinars and look at these points within these speakers just to highlight certain things about the year and certain things that they've spoken about. But you can go onto our YouTube channel. When I start the presentation, the YouTube link will be underneath. You'll be able to see how to get into our YouTube channel, how to get into our Instagram account, how to get into our Facebook account. and you'll find all these clippings there. So just because we've showed it here, we've missed out certain parts of it. You can go back to our YouTube channel, rewatch all our webinars from this year and from last year, and you can enjoy them. Just one thing is that some of our speakers, like David Neer, who's going to be one of the guys we're going to be talking about, his actual presentation, and like Marianne Dove's presentation, and a couple of our presentations, those are actually their IPs. So we cannot re-show those again. However, we can show the Q&A parts of those webinars. So I think it's been a fantastic year. I've really enjoyed it. I've learned a lot. Going through this exercise, I've also forgotten a lot. So it was great for me to go through the exercise again and re-look at everything that we had done throughout the year. And I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you enjoy what we've put out. And if you do have any questions, hopefully we can answer them. And yeah, so I think we should get started, Cassie?
Okay. First of all, Sean, how is your COVID experience? How are you feeling today?
I'm one of those people that had very, very few symptoms. It could be because I'm double vaccinated, or it could be because I'm also not a person that is actually very susceptible to COVID. But I've just got a little bit of a funny voice. And other than that, I had a temperature on one night, but a very mild temperature, and that's it. So for me, the experience has been, hasn't been all that bad. However, I have learned from our sports psychologists we have had on the show how to deal with the fact that I've been in quarantine by myself, without being able to get out and do anything. I have learned from these guys how to deal with it and how to deal with certain pressures that you face whilst you're sitting at home, because I also can't get out, I can't do anything. So I have to work from home and from my own little bubble. And it's been quite nice going back and remembering what certain people have said in our previous webinars.
Oh, great. Okay. Well, you're one of the lucky ones. I just want to ask you one thing, though. When you discover that you've got COVID, is it that anticipation, thinking to yourself, how do you cope with that feeling? Oh, what happens? I'm feeling fine now, but they say day 2, day 3, day 5, day 10. Is that quite stressful, that expectation, wondering how you're going to cope with it?
Well, not really for me. I think that if you speak to different people, they turn to you and say, "Oh, well, day 1's the worst." Then you talk to somebody else, day 2 is the worst. Then you talk to somebody else, no, day 5 is when you get it comes back at you. Then you talk to somebody else and they say day 8's the worst day because you finally think you're over it and it comes back. And I'm sitting here on day 8 at the moment, and I'm just getting better and better. However, I have made sure that I don't move around too much, that I don't have I don't exercise too much. I try, and even though I feel like I've got a lot of energy, I'll still keep myself calm and relaxed. And I've seen with my nephews that because they're youngsters, they're very young, one's 13, the other one's 11, that as soon as they start feeling better, they get a lot more energy and they start running around the house. And then later on that evening, they feel ill again. And I haven't done any of that. So it hasn't been too bad for me. From my side, it hasn't been bad at all. And everybody's got their own experience, and everybody's got a separate day which is worse for them.
Okay, well, thank you. We won't go into any more of your COVID. I want to introduce you to our first guest. So the first guest is very interesting because we heard from the government. This is Bongani Zondi. He's from the Department of Basic Education. Now, we forget that when the COVID hit us, nobody knew what to do. Not even the government knew what to do. So it was interesting when sport finally opened up, this is what he had to say. Sean, do you want to show the snippet?
Sorry, Cass, can you hear fine? You're on mute, Cassie. I can't hear you.
Sorry, no, the sound is a little bit poor. So I just wondered if.
Sorry, my sound's on maximum on my side. Anyway, I'll carry on.
Okay.
So last year, the year of Corona, it was the very tough one. Some of the organizations were very basically lost some of the officials, some of the political with great budget low, the program, basically some of the physical officials, that's how so it is said that a boy the program because
Sean, I think we should just go on to the other one. I don't know why that was so unclear. We couldn't hear a word.
Oh, no. But yeah, okay.
Let's try the structures. Okay.
Do you want to try the structures one? Because
well, yeah,
unfortunately, it
let's
doesn't
just
speak very loud.
Yes, let's just hear if that one sounds a little bit better. Let's try that one.
Okay, so it's not his presentation is very soft. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, unfortunately, on my side, I can hear it loud and clear, but I can see a lot of people are complaining because they can't hear it.
Yes, but basically, let's just talk about what he was saying. What he was saying is that the government themselves didn't really know how to open up themselves. I apologize for all of this. I thought I'd switched it off. So what they were saying was the government themselves didn't know how to do this. So it was a little tricky for them as well. And that's why they took so long before they got back to all the schools. And basically how it actually worked out is the clubs went back first, and then the schools only went back later. The schools eventually, thank goodness, all started playing. And they all started, the schools started playing, and eventually I think they shut down towards the end of the year, but I know that most of the schools got a lot of sport in.
They did. A lot of schools got their sport and they managed to play certain events. And you can see by like at the end of this year, we've got the Kaimajola week happening, the different various sporting weeks are beginning to happen. Unfortunately, some of them did miss out, as we know, like the Non-Nations Cup and Kaimajola Schools Cup. But a lot of at least school or inter-school events managed to happen.
Okay. Sean, we can see your setting for your speakers. I see one volume is quite small.
That's my microphone that I'm talking to you on.
Okay, yes. Good. All right. Okay, do you want to go? Okay, so the next one Sean can introduce, and that is David Muir. Now, David Muir is from Crystal Palace. Sean, do you want to carry on and just explain to
Yes.
them where he comes from?
Yeah. Okay, so for this year, our big seminar, we're going to actually have seminars in 8 countries in Africa, where we're going to have people from all over the world coming through to talk about various aspects within sport. And one of them was going to be David Muir. So we had a private, like a small football-focused seminar that we had, where we had people, or it was a webinar, where we had people asking questions and David Muir presenting something for this select group of people. Now, it wasn't one that we sent out to everybody. It was only for a select group, as I said. So there were people from 9 different countries. There were national coaches. There were some of the domestic provincial coaches, or not provincial coaches, but club coaches that attended David's webinar. As I said earlier, we can't show his full, his actual presentation itself. However, David did do a Q&A afterwards. So what we did is we compiled a whole lot of questions. The next day, I asked David to answer these questions, and he went through in quite a bit of detail and some of the answers to these questions. So here's some select questions that we've got. Let's see how this plays. Is that still soft?
Can't hear a word.
Okay, I'm going to try something else here. Sorry, people, please, I need to try something else. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to hear anything.
No, and then it doesn't. And fortunately, Sean is an IT buff. So he's the best one. If you can't sort it out, then I don't know who else can.
Conversations. Number one is,
good.
As a club or as a coach, you can make your mind up as early as you like, but that's slightly different to the player experience. My suggestion is, depending on what age, the youngest we'd ever see a player is about 6 years old. And I believe between 6 and 11 or 12, they should play an awful lot of positions. For example, if you think they're going to be a right winger, I would definitely, and they're right foot dominant, I would definitely play them on the left to work on their left foot. Or if they're keep coming inside onto their right foot on the left, I would give them a target to go and play outside. If you've got a really talented central defender, number 5 or 6, but you're in a good team, they're not going to be under pressure and to deal with the ball in tight situations. So I would certainly go and play that person in centre midfield where they've got pressure from 360 degrees. Again, if they're a striker, I do think it's really good that they're up there. They love scoring goals. They're the big money player, and play them up there. But do go and play them in central midfield for the same reason. So they got pressure from 360 degrees. So I'd continually, until 11 or 12, when they go and play 11-a-side football, they can get as many different experiences. And goalkeepers as well. As we know in the modern game, you touch the ball at least 7 times more with your feet than your hands. So don't keep that, particularly in a talent team, don't keep that goalkeeper in goal. Go and play them as a central defender. It's the same game, a little bit higher up. They'll be working their feet. And if they're really talented, go and play them in centre midfield, again, for that pressurised situation to develop their range of passes. And also for a goalkeeper, the athleticism in training. We don't want them to be sedentary. So the conversation is, one is you might have a plan in your mind or forming, but if we remember Aaron Wan-Bissaka, Victor Moses, Nathaniel Klein, all 3 of them started as strikers and wingers and ended up as fullbacks or wingbacks. And the last thing I want to say on that is under 9, under 10, under 11, under 12, you might have your gold players. I can be sure that each year you go up, a different one, a little bit like a horse race, them coming up on the rails, a different one will show. So you can have your best guess, but I wouldn't pigeonhole or box somebody off in a position too early.
So that's the first speech that he actually made, well, the first question that we brought up. And I think that's quite, even though he's talking about football, it is quite pertinent to other sports too. A lot of other sports also have people at different age groups that also shine a little bit earlier. You've got your earlier developers, your later developers, and you can't lose out on either of them. One of the things about that he did bring up afterwards, he actually said, have a look at the age group or the month where your kids are born. And with South Africa, we've got our seasons from January to December with football. lot of your kids in January, February, March, April develop a little bit quicker than the guys that are in November, December, October, November, December. And do they get more benefit than other kids? Are they all getting equal opportunities or not? It's up to you to have a look at that and see how you can actually make sure that kids are born 11, 10 months apart can still have the equal opportunities and can still develop and can still form part of your teams. Because a lot of teams, and we had some reviews from some of the coaches saying that most of their players were born in the first 4 months of the year for the first team, and the second and third team were from later on in the year. So it's just an interesting one to have a look at and see what you're trying to do, because at Crystal Palace, they'll have a 10 and a 10 and a half year age group, and then 11 and a half year age group, just to make sure that everybody gets an opportunity, everybody plays, and everybody develops at a reasonably consistent pace. Here's one just specifically for South Africa with coaching education in South Africa.
I think Sean's doing a wonderful job, if he doesn't mind me saying so. So I guess these seminars are one way of doing it. Face to face, obviously, even better when this pandemic is over. I think it's become, I'm not saying England sneezes and South Africa gets a cold, but it's something that evolves over time. And I guess everything that's happening in South Africa is moving in the right direction. And without being aloof or arrogant or about the UK game, I would suggest we are a little bit ahead. You need a formal qualification network across coaching, we call it talent identification for recruitment and scouting, and then the sports science and medicine, and those formal qualifications. I would suggest that in this modern world, a real big menu of online qualifications that are not too hard to get hold of at the entry level. We have sort of level 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 in the coaching world. Level 1 is an enthusiastic grassroots parent or associate of a club. Level 2, the first little bit that's formal, that are under 18s at Crystal Palace do that in their second year. They don't have to do level 1. Because of their assumed prior learning, because of they're in the professional game, they skip level 1, they do level 2. Level 3, it used to be called the UEFA B license in Europe. That's a serious qualification. Level 4 is the UEFA advanced license, and that's only you have to be in 11-a-side football, and it's really for the professional game. And then level 5 is the pro license. So having that sort of menu of coaching qualifications, but making sure they're accessible. We in the UK, they only last between 1 and 3 years. You have to constantly upgrade your hours, so it's not a certificate to go and put on your wall and forget about. It's a little bit like passing the driving test. Once you've got the certificate, now you start learning to drive. So I think it's really important to constantly update. But online seminars are great, getting face to face, and then coaches spreading that and constantly having seminars and sharing experience. But the fact that we're on the seminar on Saturday and Sean's doing this wonderful work, I can only think it's going in the right direction. I'll be more than happy to help out in any way I can.
Now, over and above the formal education side, you still have a coaching manual that comes through, which is more your culture of your team. Each club has got their certain style of play. However, just note what he says about the rigidity of it, because you can't stick to it word for word. You have to be able to allow changes of things. You have to adapt your style of coaching to suit your players and suit the players that you've got under you.
Every minute of every age group in every position, technically, tactically, physically, psychologically, and socially, is accounted for. There is a plan, a long-term athletic development plan. We call it an LTAD, and that would be right the way through to the first team, with that ultimate goal of producing players for our first team, international football, or saleable assets. So everything is geared towards the Palace way, and it's specifically designed to that to optimize them in all of the 5 areas: technically, tactically, physically, psychologically, and socially. And it's an enormous piece of work. And what's really important, once you've got this enormous document, is bringing it right down. And I'm not really want to get political, but there's a Winston Churchill quote: "I apologize for this terribly long speech. I didn't have time to write a short one." And I use that all the time as And that is, once you've got this enormous document, can you get each relevant document onto one side of A4 for a particular age group coach or member of that multidisciplinary team, so it's simple, fun, easy to use and clear. It's the hard bit is not creating this manual, it's making it simple and short and concise. That's the bit that takes the time. But yes, and what we do like is for coaches to come away from that slightly, and let's not forget the element of fun and competition and having a little bit of freedom. So we always have a 20-minute slot per week. Coaches or players freedom, and some of the coaches like the coaches they can go something completely away from the Palace way, and sometimes they let the players choose. And we had a couple of coaches who said nothing, and they knew the players had a load of equipment in the middle and could do anything they wanted with 20 minutes, and the coaches would just stand back and observe, because as we know, the player needs to generate his or her career, and it's interesting to see how they work independently and on their own. I hope that's answered that one.
Now, I know he's talking about an academy here, but he also, at the moment, he's not coaching at Crystal Palace. He's not the director of the academy at Crystal Palace anymore. He actually coaches at a school, and he's done the same thing at the school. He's come in, he's got a coaching manual for the entire school, which takes him from the 6-year age group all the way up to the 18s, 19s, and he's installed this thing in the school. So everybody's got something to work towards and strive towards. But remember, don't make it too rigid that you can't, or make it quite rigid within the actual coaching manual itself, but also allow people the opportunity to think outside the box, to break down the way the manual is actually done. And you can also relook and change the manual as you go on with your coaching. Okay, so have you picked up any interesting questions yet?
No, everything's fine at the moment.
Okay. Then now, the next two clips here, they were totally separate questions, but when you look at them, they actually slightly contradict each other. The one is the club more important, or is the school more important than the game, given that you are paid by your school or paid by your club to actually perform and to achieve certain results? And the second one is where we actually say to him, and he said, now you've scouted a certain player in a certain area, and not going around you find a second player or a third player in that specific position. What do you do with that player if you don't have enough space for him in your team? Do you give him to another team? What do you actually do? And look at how he slightly contradicts himself between the two talks.
We're ambassadors for the game. Whoever wrote this, brilliant, lots of reflection there, food for thought. And I went away when I got this and with my cup of tea, and it made me think for hours. Absolutely, the game's more important. We are paid by the club and academy. We have got criteria to hit in terms of productivity. Going back to the elite player performance plan, it used to be, I don't know if it still is, 15% of your criteria to achieve category 1 status, the highest status. Crystal Palace Academy is now category 1, the highest status you can get for a youth program. 15% is productivity. As a slight aside, when it first came out, yeah, I think I'm comfortable saying this. Productivity is for number of homegrown players, and the biggest points accumulated for a UK-based homegrown player that came through your academy, it went to a player called Cesc Fabregas, who strangely arrived at Arsenal at 16 years old, went straight into the first team squad, but because he had achieved all sorts of international and domestic honours throughout, he was classed as an Arsenal Academy homegrown player. That baffled me to this day. That is different to, I'm not saying Wilfried Zaha, Victor Moses had the same senior career as Fabregas. He's wonderful, wonderful player, but Arsenal didn't develop him. They bought him from abroad and came in, but still got the points for the homegrown player. So to answer your question, we've got 15% is productivity, and the chairman would want to speak to us and ask us, you know, he needs output at the end for all his financial investment, but definitely the game's more important. The things that are right up the front for us, respect, keep racism out of sport, the respect barriers, the parents' code of conduct, how the players conduct themselves, making wonderful human beings, education, educating our coaches, making sure that everyone's a wonderful ambassador for the club, and making sure, be it pre-academy at under 7 and 8, or as they come through our academy system, which happens to the vast majority in that pyramid, we have to release a player or part company, or their time at Crystal Palace comes to an end, we'd like them with a shake of hands that we're not allowed to do currently, and they go away with a smile on their face thinking, I've had an absolutely wonderful time and I'm still in love with the game. And fortunately at Crystal Palace, you're likely to get an opportunity at another club, 1, 2 or 3 clubs, and then even if not, to go back into junior football. Yeah, and I will tell you, I went for a walk yesterday, and there was a player that we had under 8, 9, 10, 11 and 12 who got released. He was with his family walking his dog, and he came across the field and said, hi Dave, how are you? And I guess that's a wonderful example of someone, it didn't work out for them. He's still playing football and rugby, strangely, I found out yesterday, and we're still friendly. So hopefully that's answered that. I think the game is miles more important in the academy, but if you're on a paid role, don't just have the game up the front. You do need to hit your criteria for your elite player performance plan, productivity and output. Number 17, brilliant question, probably my favorite question on here. I'm going to speak for myself. I can't speak for anyone else in football. No, definitely keep that player for you and your club, and make sure you can do an awful lot of things. If there's only 2 in that position, you can definitely change your system of play. You can play, if they're both fantastic players, you can play one of them in the age group above. You can play one of them in a different position, but just have an agreement that they both swap around. If it was an absolutely super player, I would have 2 squads of that age group and play them both. That's the selfish side of me coming out, that if I thought they were a talent, and depending on the age, there are so many benefits of playing 2 or 3 different positions. If we're looking at systems of play, it's where you stand, where the referee blows the whistle at half time. I'll be at the start of the game and at half time. I'll be really disappointed if that player just stands still in there. We want them to move, to replace, to rotate, to come out of position. So certainly a system of play could accommodate 2. In Holland, they're very good at one club ringing another club and saying, oh, that there is a player for you. I guess I will speak a little bit for not just me, but maybe the UK mentality. We're all on top of each other. There's 11 clubs in London and we're fiercely competitive. It wouldn't be the case in London that we would ring another club and share them. But it does happen in other parts of the UK, possibly, and certainly in other European countries. But in England and London, no. But I think it's the right thing to do sometimes. But no, if he was talented, our target would always be to get 1 player into the first team every year. And if, from what you're saying, that would be 2 chances to get a player in, as long as it didn't mean that we were taking 2 bigger squads and that neither of the 2 players that you're mentioning are not getting the care and attention and not getting their match minutes. Then at that point, of course, we would make a decision, and then at that point we would find a club. But if they're good and that good, we'd find a position and the match minutes and the development action plan and long-term athletic development plan at our club.
So it doesn't quite contradict himself, but you can see that there's a slight thing that, the game's more important. But however, if there's a great 2 good players fighting for the same position, try and hold on to them and try and find ways to actually get both players into the actual academy structures and keep them in your academy, and hopefully you can actually develop them both. But I still believe that if you can't, if there's no space for you, rather give him to another club where he can actually grow with this player can develop and can actually, you never know, that player could eventually in the future be a better player than the one that you kept. And it's unlucky if you don't have it. I know in this specific talk, we had a guy from Sporting that actually replied back saying that they had a player that they really struggled with, who was good, but they just had a player that was slightly better than him. So this player went off to Crystal Palace, did exceptionally well at Crystal Palace, and actually ended up playing for his national team ahead of the previous player. So keep the player in the system in some way, in whatever way possible, so that you can carry on developing the players. I thought that was quite an interesting question. And then the last one is, it repeats a little bit of one of the previous ones that we spoke about. And this is players picking players at a very, very young age. What do you do about late developers?
There's the coaching question. So once the players have been signed, it's the coaches now, or the team behind those coaches, that say, right, we either have a policy that everyone gets equal amount of minutes, or you take a small squad, so you only carry 1 or 2 extra per little match, so that everyone plays all the minutes, and you might just come off at the younger ages just for a quick drink break and then back on. If you take too many players, you've got to make decisions. I would play them all in different positions, and I would have the results totally unimportant, and making sure that if we're talking about late developers and early developers and things, maybe go on the bio banding. So align groups, and with the opposition, we're playing people, if it was under 10s, 11s, 12s and 13s from their date of birth, we would say that, I would say, put the players that are biologically with their development 10 years old on one pitch, 11 years old on another pitch, 12 years old on another pitch, 13-year-old on another pitch. And it may be an under 10s, an early developer goes up to play with the 12s, an under 13s, a late developer, and goes and plays with the 10-year-olds because they're a late developer. That way you can take that bias away. And again, at that age, even at a professional club, the vast majority should be on fun, enjoying, love the ball, love the game, not worried about results. Yes, we say winning's not important, but trying to win is really important. So we want them to be competitive and to try to win as an individual, but the coach should just be, we say the right things are never the wrong things. The wrong things are never the right. So if the players are doing the right thing, the coaches are doing the right thing, the result's not important. Goals scored, goals conceded. As we know, we learn lots from when we lose games of football and concede. And just linked to that, not your direct question, but we had a 6-minute maximum post-match debrief, often 4 minutes, and if they were full-time, often none. Our youngest players played on a Sunday, but they trained on a Monday, so we often gave no feedback at all on Sunday after the match, win, lose or draw, because caught up in the emotions of the game, the player could reflect, the coach could reflect, and then they do some video analysis and just a little bit of fun analysis and some feedback on the Monday. The player would do their own first, and then we would do it, and then we don't do that. If they didn't train the following day and there's some feedback, we had 6 minutes maximum, and that's probably 3 or 4 minutes from the players, 2 minutes from the coach. But whether they won or lost, it was exactly the same amount of time. I'm sure you've all seen that situation where a coach and a team's won the game and they're all happy and patting each other on the back, and there's no debrief whatsoever, and then they've lost a game of football despite them playing wonderfully and being beaten by a better team or earlier developing team, and they're sitting down there an hour later with the coach wagging their finger. That's a terrible environment. I would say that trust and having just that simple bit, win, lose or draw in the age groups, nothing bad's going to happen, win, lose or draw, and just being constant and that trust. Otherwise players will tense up, they won't express themselves and be creative. So sorry, that was a slight tangent on that one.
So that last little piece you'll see later on when we talk to Dr. Marianne Dove. She also talks about EQ of coaches and how you approach players and how you deal with players. So for this one here, we actually did 6 video clips, so you could see because we didn't show David Muir to our Intune coaching group, but the rest of the people that we are going to start highlighting from now onwards will be 2, maybe 3 little clips from each person. Just one thing on that, David Muir, I'm just going to repeat something I said earlier on. The academy is big enough at Crystal Palace for the younger age group to have an age 10, age 10 and a half. A lot of schools don't have that opportunity. So the idea of making smaller teams, making sure everybody plays, everybody develops, everybody gets the opportunity is a nice way of actually making sure that all players, even the latest developers, have a chance to get first class and proper coaching. And when they do develop at a later stage, they do have the skills to go on and carry on performing for the team. Okay, so the next one, and Cassie will introduce him, is we actually move into sports psychology now.
Yes, mental health. At the moment, mental health is top priority. Now, what is very interesting, we're dealing with a cricketer at the moment. He's an ex-cricketer, an ex-England cricketer. and he suffered from mental, well, he went through a dip in his performance, and it affected him mentally quite substantially. Anyway, he was dealing with the doctor at the club, and the doctor went to the coach and said to the coach, listen, you got to go easy on this guy. He's got mental problems. Well, he's going through a mental challenge at the moment. And he was immediately, the coach went and said, that's fine, you're never going to play again, go find another club. Now that actually made the whole situation worse. Anyway, to make a long story short, he then gave up the game, and we're putting some plans together. He's a brilliant photographer, so we're finding another career for him at the moment. But Sean, I think let's talk about what Eugene had to say, but he was extremely interesting on mental health between coaches and players.
No, just one thing on Eugene's side is that, and we're going to play the coach's mental health first, because if your mental health is not in the right place, you'll battle to help out the kids underneath you. So you often got to focus on yourself, making sure that you've got a certain level where you can actually assist the kids, and you're not taking out your issues, your problems, your whatever you've got on the kids and creating problems for the kids. So I'll play first the part about coach's mental health, and then I'll play a part about the players themselves' mental health.
I work with coaches a lot, and it's one of the loneliest jobs in the world, other than the lighthouse keeper. I believe coaches need to also have mentors. I recommend mentors to them. So where do older coaches go that no longer are active? Go look for a mentor. Go check in with someone. I always also recommend to coaches, try not to do everything. Establish a leadership team in your squad. So have 3, 4, 5 players, run a lot of the discipline issues, the morale issues, set up the training area. You don't have to do everything, coach. Empower some of your senior players to take some of the load off. And sometimes I say, take a week off, in the preseason, let the team run their training, that leadership group. The tough job for coaches is long hours, poor pay, often weekends away, and evenings when they have to train. So I always say to coaches, take care of your family life, take care of your home life, because that's often where coaches struggle.
I think for a more experienced coach, you're going to be used to having somebody that you can talk to, a mentor, somebody that you can trust to give you advice. So you don't listen to 100 parents giving you advice in 100 different ways. You actually know there's a person that can give you criticism on yourself, or or actually advice or assistance to you on your coaching, something that you can trust and you can believe in, and that can support you. And that often will help out with your mental health as a coach. But it's a very lonely job sometimes being a coach, and you sometimes find yourself as the only person in the field that believes in a certain thing, and a certain way, and everybody's against you, especially if your results aren't going your way.
The most important message always is, and I hope coaches, some coaches will say, just toughen up. That's absolutely the wrong message. What most coaches can try to do is be more empathic and send a signal to athletes that it's okay if you're not feeling okay. It's okay. Often the stigma is more difficult than the actual issue. The second thing a coach can do is just say, have there been any life-changing events in your life? Did someone die? Is your mom and dad divorcing? Are there financial issues? So for coaches to constantly do the hi, how are you conversations. The third one is a culture of care factor in a team, where a coach creates an environment where there's a sense of deep love and deep friendship in a squad, especially at that age, you know, that there's a sense of enjoyment and fun. That's how you prevent mental health issues. Because once you have somebody with a mental health illness, it's a completely difficult area that requires intervention, time, and often the person have to leave the sport to recover.
That's the next one is at a bit of an extreme of that. So Matsalani Mamabolo is a journalist, and he had the privilege of writing a book called Yoyisa, and it's about a South African athlete, Tombisinto Mfunzi, and she was actually raped by a serial killer. And just because she came from a certain tribe that he didn't actually murder her, he left her on the side of the road. And her recovery now, I mean, this is extreme mental health issues and that she had to face with, and how she actually dealt with what she was dished out with, and how she actually moved on to carry on competing. She actually competed in a race the next day. And it's an interesting book, a book that you can buy, and it's freely available in South Africa, and just learn about what she's gone through. And it's quite an empowering book that he actually wrote. Unfortunately, she couldn't speak to us because she's very focused on her sport, and she had sprinting sessions that afternoon. But yeah, so this is the first part where, and it's quite a nice one, is that sport has the power to heal. So if you think about it now, yeah, COVID, I mean, she's got a very extreme situation, but also with COVID and stuff, sport still has the power to heal and get you over certain things.
But I have found that through sports, a lot of people can get over whatever difficulties that they have gone through. I, for one, I remember I took up running in 2017, and I've just found it to be so therapeutic. If I'm going through the stresses of work, the stresses of life, the road is always a place to go to, and I find that I'm at a much better place thereafter.
Yeah, he also spoke about how she also found the same thing. So, you know, through sport, and that comes part of her lessons that she is teaching to other people that have survived similar things to her. And she's an amazing athlete. She's an amazing person.
Ntombi says to rape survivors that find something to live for. For her, running was her saving grace. The moment after all that happened, I mean, she went and ran the very next day. She was raped on a Saturday, woke up Saturday morning and ran and won a 21-kilometer race. And over time, whenever she was feeling down, she would go and run, and that has helped her. And her message to a lot of survivors is find something that helps you. If you have a spouse and your spouse is your reason for living, let her be somebody. If you've got a child, if you've got any hobby, if your job helps you. So find something to do. But she says there's more to life after being raped. Yes, it's difficult. She still goes through days when the whole memory of what happened still haunts her. She cries, but she doesn't cry as much as she has because she has resolved to continue with her life despite what happened.
So you can go and support Ntombi and buy her book. And that will also help her support other victims of rape. And she's, as I said, she's fantastic, and definitely a story worthwhile reading and finding out a lot more about her. And when you see her on the side of the road or see her running a race, go and support her. She's an amazing person.
Okay, now we're going to get back onto soccer. We had 2 webinars over the year, one with Neil and one with Farouk. Now, Neil started the Sports School of Excellence in the 1990s, and Farouk was one of the coaches at that stage. Then Neil went off and his career took on a different path. He went into coaching, and he finally went to SAFA as a technical director, whereas Farouk continued on his path on the academy, So both of them, the one talked about setting up an academy, and the other one spoke about rather, he's got his academy now, and the modern game, the modern way, how he has done it now. So I think we're going to talk to Neil first. Sean, are you there? Let's
just make sure I can share this thing again, because I see that it's, and see if it still works fine.
Okay.
Okay.
So basically, Neil is just going to talk about how he did it. And Farouk is going to talk more about the technical aspect and with the players. We also, are you going to show it now? Definition of an academy?
Yeah, you were talking. So do you want me to continue?
Yes, now you can try.
When people talk of academy, you've got to say, okay, the person trying to set up academy, are you trying to set up a development team? Are you trying to put up a high performance center? And a lot of those are different categories of high performance, if I could characterize it that. You know, and it gets misused a lot of the time because persons or people just want to establish a so-called academy in a community. But it is mainly, first of all, it must be structured to be a football team. And then that team develops into another team, which then becomes a number of teams, and then it becomes a club. And that's what's loosely phrased in South Africa, for an example, that the academy, they suddenly call them academies. They're not academies yet. They've got to establish themselves. They've got to register themselves, firstly, as a club or a team with the local football association. That's paramount, because together with that, then they can be monitored and then develop themselves into high performance centers, and then maybe onto the higher category of an academy or an elite high performance center, which is termed that. And there's a lot of different facets that come into that. Requirements from wherever you are, whatever country you are, the association has certain requirements that get put together with an academy, a high performance center. So from one of these, the caliber of coaches, what caliber of coaches do you have? What levels of education do they have? What facilities do you have? What staff do you have to be around these players? And the like, and the standard and quality of the fields, change rooms, facilities, that all has to be put into perspective before you can call yourself an academy.
Can I play the next one?
Yep, carry on.
You must be registered with the local football association. And then as an academy, then you get registered with the National Association. But it'll all be done through the local football association. They will have persons there of that educational or coaches of the qualification to go in, view the center, view the academy, whatever it is, look at what I've just described to you with the facilities, coaches, and everything alike. And then they will put a category of academy to it, or high performance to it, or local football development phase to it. And they will then grade them, if you can call them so, into the various categories. And that obviously depends on the caliber of a coach. Do these academies have technical directors? Do they have managers? Do they have physios, doctors? The support staff that goes together with having an academy, the kind of program, football program that is on the go. Is the education linked to it? Do these kids come in the afternoon and then and during the day, are they at a local school nearby? Do they have school facilities? As I mentioned with my Football School of Excellence, where we were registered as a private school. So all those factors get taken into account and get graded. And then you come to what kind of philosophy comes out of this high performance center or academy. Well, what are they trying to achieve? Are they trying to be a team come club to provide talent for the professional teams within their community, within their province or region? And so all those different factors have to be taken into account. And do they have a scouting network? Do they only scout players within their community? So they want to service their area, their community in which they live, or they're sourcing talent and they have a national scouting network where they scout talent from nationally to come into there to better the players, then to provide the talent for the professional teams within the professional environment of your country.
Okay, Sean, you can go on to the next one.
If you want to run an academy or high performance center, you must do it right. Don't do half measures. Make sure you cover all the bases from the medical side, the coaching side, the managerial side, and all the add-ons that come with it.
That last one is just a very short one, that there's good intentions are not enough to run a successful academy. You have to run it correctly.
Okay, I think can we have a look at Farouk's now? We're running out of time, so we're going to go through these quite quickly now.
Claiming now compensation from the club that Luther is going to, and it's quite a nice sum of money that you get for that because it's in euros. So you can get between 400,000 and 500,000 for compensation. But now, how often are you going to have a Luther going through? You understand what I'm saying? Your bread and butter players that are playing in the PSL, that are playing for smaller clubs, this is where you also need to get some compensation because you've invested in them. And this is where I feel clubs should, by right, say, look, this is a fund we're putting aside for people that develop as an incentive, so that you as Cassie who's developing players is going to say, wow, my hard work is not going to be such where I'm not going to be rewarded for it. So I think in South Africa, a lot of people, and I mentioned, I'm maybe at a different level of this structure. Guys at the bottom are even worse off. I mean, guys that develop players at township level don't get a blue penny. If they get a set of kit or balls, they're lucky. And I think it's totally unfair. They should also get something too, so that they can continue doing what they're doing, because those are the most important people in scouting the first talent. You know, we had Maslubi at Chiefs. He used to bring, the guy wasn't a well-educated person, but he had an eye for talent. And he would bring Jabu Pule to me, Isaac Mabotsa, Tantla Kubeka, Junior Kani, all these players he brought to me. And the success I had at Chiefs as a consequence was because of his scouting. I had to obviously develop these players, but if he didn't scout the right players, I wouldn't have been able to achieve what I did. A number of factors that are involved. Firstly, there's not enough development taking place at grassroots. I think at grassroots, you know, you mentioned earlier that the parents put tremendous pressure on these kids. They want to live their dreams through their kids. And you find a child going home crying. I've seen this on a number of occasions where kids are left crying because they didn't win a match, and the dad is on their backs, the coaches are on their backs. So I think from a youth perspective, we're doing that wrong. We should not be putting these kids through this traumatic experiences. And then you find the lack of school sports is also a factor. You look at a country like Australia, 25% of their gross budget goes towards sport. And they teach kids basic movement. They have sports at school, and ultimately the child chooses what sport he wants to play. They are not known to be a footballing nation, but I think if you look at them pound for pound, they're ahead of us, and they would probably you know, give us a run for our money. And we've seen that in the past where they have several players playing in the European leagues. So that is the other. The other thing is the mental aspect. Our players are not mentally prepared to play in Europe. I think too often they can't deal with the challenges that they face. We come from a society where confidence is a huge factor. We don't encourage players to be confident. We want them to toe the line when it comes to the way they conduct themselves to their peers, etc. We don't allow them to be outspoken and ask questions. It's a case of you do what I tell you, don't do what I do, but do what I tell you. So from that perspective, we need to change that as well. And I think also the quality of coaching that we do, we miss out a lot on the fundamentals and the different stages of development. So these are a number of factors that contribute to players struggling there. Some of them feel it's better to come back home and play for a local club, because clubs here are paying quite a good salary for players. I mean, we pay better wages than what players get in Sweden and in Denmark. I mean, I'm talking about the smaller entry level teams. Even though they're playing in euros, there are players here that are earning close to $1 million a month, top players. So why go to Europe when you can earn that money here? So that hunger and desire that you speak about from Ghanaians, Nigerians, etc., is such because that's their escape from poverty. That's their meal ticket. That's their ticket to becoming famous and successful. But also, they play a lot of informal football. Those kids, when they grow up, they play a lot of football where there's no pressure. And when they get scouted, they get put into development programs. So when you look at Sadio Mane, don't look at him as a player who just came from Senegal and ended up playing in a top club in Europe. He had to go through different stages. He had to play in France, in the smaller divisions, in the lower leagues, and he had to work his way up. And the coaching he received, Sean, has now made it possible for him to become a top player at Liverpool. So it's a process. Not every player, it's not a fairy tale where a kid goes from Nigeria and is an instant success. A lot of these kids go to Europe at a very young age. Some of them just go there illegally, live in the country, and a lot of them live on the street. And they're looking at this dream of playing for a top team. Some of them get scouted very early on, and they are put into the proper development academies in Europe. And often you hear people say the French team is an African team, but we don't realize the amount of work the French have done to ensure that those players reach that level. So yes, they are from Africa, but it's Europe that educated them and developed them to become these top players. It's criminal. If there was a policing system, coaches that have 12-year-olds playing on full fields should be charged and maybe even given a bit of a fine or even a jail sentence, because it's criminal, really it is. I mean, if you look at the biological individuality, the biological makeup of a child of 12, where in heaven's name is he going to be able to cover that distance? Secondly, how often does he get the ball? Because I'm sure you've seen, Sean, when they play, it's like a bun fight. Wherever the ball is, you have these kids running, like swarming like bees. There's no ways that you can develop footballers on a big field. You want them to have maximum amount of touches. And the only way you can do that is to play small-sided games. So if FIFA says that and they say a smaller size goal, it's because this is not a young adult. This is a youngster. This is a junior. This is a kid that we're talking about. So we must never confuse football by trying to ensure that a kid plays an adult game. It's just not going to work. And we've seen it in the past where kids don't develop properly because of playing on these big fields. In fact, I had a game in Soweto once and I was fuming. I called the coaches and said to the coaches, they were playing, how can you do this? And then they apologized profusely and said, Coach, sorry, we didn't know you were here. I said, doesn't matter if I'm here or anybody else. You don't do that. A kid should never be playing on of 12 years old, should never be playing on a full pitch. But when FIFA do their research and when they make use of expertise, they make use of the best expertise, they come up with plans that is suitable for the different age groups. And I mean, we need to take a cue from them as being the mother body or the governing body in world football to say they are educating, they're spending millions on educating coaches because they want to ensure that football, the product grows and it becomes a spectator, attraction as such.
Okay, now we're going to go on to Fran. We're only going to do a couple more. So I'm sorry we're running a little bit over, but I hope this is actually of great interest to you all. But let's just discuss Fran quickly. Now, Fran put women's football on the map in South Africa. She, to me, is the epitome of somebody that never gives up. She's the most tenacious woman. She had no money. She ran women's football from the boot of her car for about 10 years before she was finally accepted by SAFA, and she has set up the existing structures in SAFA today. So Sean, won't you play the clippings of Fran?
Do you want me to play specific ones or all of them?
Just let's start from the first one and go through.
Very unstructured, really, and there was a football body, and I got involved in that called South African Women Football Association. I got involved there, eventually became the president, but the football had mainly been structured with white women, colored women from the Cape area. So I made it my business specifically with a man called Joseph Mkonza to get the black women involved, because they obviously were playing, but it wasn't unified, and we did that. And then when SAFA came into operation in 93 or whatever, we came with our body and joined them, and tried to get, of course, then the national team going, which we did as a SAFA national team. There'd always been a national team, but with the apartheid and the suspension from FIFA, we couldn't play in FIFA World Cup. So we then got a team going that could affiliate to FIFA, which we did, but always struggling, no kit, no money, no nothing. We had old Bafana kit. The girls had no boots. It was very difficult. Traveled with no money, but it was really taxing. But it grew, and now I think it's probably one of the biggest sports for women in the country. Very difficult. There's not much happening at many LFAs. It's basically a lot of the teams that succeed or do well, it's because there's someone who's a committed manager, coach, who's driving the process. I think that's how it's always been. If I look back on teams I've known around wherever, any province, whatever, it's always been down to one or two people who've driven the process, and it's still like that. And all I can do is try and advise people. Some LFAs have leagues, some don't. Some have SASL, some have regional leagues. It varies from region to region. So it really is up to an individual to try and make a difference. And I try and help them as much as possible with coaching tips, that kind of thing. But it's not easy. It's not as structured as it should be. There isn't national school football. That's a big problem. That has to be addressed, that football is available in the schools to girls and boys or nationally. They have a massive girls' school soccer leagues, massive. Girls' football is the national sport. They have leagues at all age levels. At school, massive infrastructure, and you have teams from school flying from one of the regions to another every weekend. All the parents go with, they all fly around. I followed it very closely and saw how they do it. And then all the girls are scouted by colleges to come and play the UCLA League, the United College League of America. And football is played at college level, and it's the national sport. It's massive, and that's why since 91, 95, 99, USA won the World Cup and continue to be right up there. I've raised continuously on the CAF technical committees. CAF doesn't play enough competition, and African teams don't play enough. Hence, we used to have 2 places in the Olympics, and because the African teams did badly, they actually took away 1 place. and now we have to play off against one of the North American people to get into the Olympics. So we've actually gone a step backwards. Fortunately, in the African Women Cup of Nations, we've got another slot, but without teams playing continuously that are in Africa, it's extremely difficult to do well at the World Cup. I mean, or the Olympics. I remember Zimbabwe qualified for the Olympics, and they played one friendly against us. And you have America playing 153 friendlies. So Africa, because of distance, proximity, finances, so many reasons, the teams just do not play enough games, and then you send them off like Zambia now went to the Olympics, having played 2 or 3 friendlies, and you must compete. It's not possible. But I know that if these teams had the opportunity to compete like the European teams, American teams, we would have won a World Cup donkeys years ago in Africa. In Africa, I've always said it, I'll keep saying it, Africa is a sleeping giant, and we're waking up, but we don't have the finances and often the interest from the MAs. But we have some of the best players in the world. That's a fact. Players like Assi Satishola have been nominated. I was there. She won the best player of the Under-20 World Cup in Canada. That tells you we have some of the best players, but we don't compete in Africa. And if you don't compete, you can't compete. And that's why we need to have far more funding to Africa to play more friendlies. CAF needs to have not just the African Women Cup of Nations. They need that every 2 years. Now we have the Champions League for the first time. That's a big step forward. But we need competition so that we can compete with Europe and the rest of the world, because we are equal on performance.
Just on that, congratulations to Sundowns, who won the first ever CAF Women's Champions League. And Fran was one of the founders of that tournament. Okay, the next speaker we've got, Lungu Kapiso. He's actually from Drug-Free Sport, and he covered various elements within drug-free sport, and we'll just quickly go through 2 of them that he actually spoke about.
Yeah, look, there are generic signs and symptoms, and actually there's a slide I wish I showed you now that I didn't. But there are generic symptoms that you can sort of pick up, especially within your teens. Moodiness, boys losing their facial hairs for those who already are growing facial hairs, or for those who didn't have facial hair over 3 months, they're now growing facial hair. You look at girls start to develop facial hairs as well. Boys lose their Adam's apple, and they lose the deepness of their voice, which can be a difficult thing to sort of identify in grade 8, 9, and 10 maybe, but perhaps in your grade 11s and 12s, you begin to see the boy developing and as they mature. And then ladies, you see in young girls, their voice starts to deepen a little bit, because what we see happening is that evidence shows that the reversal of patterns between male and female, it becomes so significant that it's easy to spot. Then we've got something that we've tamed, roid rage, which really is this aggression begins to simmer. Just small things are taken out of context, or they just, there's an over exaggerated reaction to them. And I think those are just some of the surface levels reactions. And then some of the deeper things that from a medical point of view, we always say, you must start watching for a pattern of injuries. Players are now all of a sudden getting injured way easier than they used to be. And if you actually take that in reference of the bigger professional playing pool, look at the Premier League and the number of players that are having heart attacks on the field. Look at rugby, look at any other professional sport. professional players are having cardiac arrest on the field. Why? Because we've changed our diet, the way we eat. We've changed some of the substances that we depend on as part of our recovery or as part of our training regimen. And these come at the compromise of our bodies that we put under extreme pressure. And so those are just some of the things, the easy signs that you can look out for, I think. The school coach or administrator to the parent or the asking party, if you've never set everybody down in a hall and you said, as a school, as a club, this is our stance on anti-doping. Because then anybody who comes forward, they come forward knowing what are the rules, what is the regulation, what is our stance, and they merely coming looking for a further detailed breakdown of the information or of the rules or of the stance. Versus if it's all left unsaid and there's this assumption, then it's going to be difficult to come down and lay the law of the house, because you don't want to make anybody uncomfortable or lose any parents or students, because also we must understand that schools want to have kids coming in, because essentially that's the business of the day, right? So I think it's very important then that schools sit down and they first internally, from an administration point, set their law of the house. What is regulation for this school in relation to anti-doping? And then communicate that to the parents, to the players, to the coaches, so that everybody is on the same wavelength. And then thereafter, anybody who comes with a question mark, it is always in reference to our regulation and stance as a school.
Okay, now we were lucky in this case here where we actually had a contact with Dr. Marianne Dove, and she and together with Dr. Janine Gray and her husband Andrew Gray launched their new programs called The Locker Room. And you can go to the website, it's thelockerroom.org.za, and they help coaches out in various aspects within sport. Marianne's a specialist in EQ in sport, and it's actually fascinating what they're doing. They're actually trying to help out in various aspects. They pretty much cover the whole side of sport with their company. So they're absolutely phenomenal as a company.
I mean, I think it's a combination of everything. It's a combination. There would certainly be EQ of that captain, and not so much EQ. Maybe it's partly EQ, but it's really understanding his individual player, and so that would have been the captain. I mean, but just was what coaches are important of. I mean, and I think understanding each individual player is probably what is critical. What buttons can you push with each player? How far can you push each player? Some people you might not have been able to do that with. And that is something that we address quite a lot, is that coaching has moved a lot from being, we coach in one way, our whole team. But we need to now coach each individual player. And yeah, at under 10 level, it's fine to coach everyone the same way. But as you start getting older, because people respond psychologically differently, mentally, but even physically, obviously, and even towards injuries, everyone responds differently. And it's understanding your player would have been important.
And then they've got an opinion on high performance centers at schools and focusing purely on the result.
I don't know if I can be politically correct in answering this question. I would just say I don't think any athlete wants to peak at high school. I think that's not the aim. And I think there was a question that came up in the chat I saw earlier about, nutrition in girls' sports. There's a lot of attrition rate, and I think what we're doing here is we've got to look at the bigger picture. We've got to say school sport is important, yes, but exercising, getting kids to understand the importance and the benefits of exercise, in my opinion, far outweigh the long-term benefit for what exercise and sport can ultimately do. So, I mean, most of the schools have high-performance centers. They all talk about it, but to me, when we look at it from a performance perspective, you see very few of those people that play first-team sport go on to play club sport. And or even play professional sport. sorry, I'm going to mention Gary Kirsten. I know he gives a wonderful talk, and he tells all the parents in the talk to stand up, and you sit down if you ever participated in any representative sport. And of course, at the end of this, everyone's sitting down. He's standing up because he says, okay, so there's only one person that's represented their country in a sport here, and that's obviously him. And I think that the analogy that he gives is incredibly strong, because we have these ideals as parents that we want our school kids to be elite sportsmen. The reality is they love sport at high school, but there's very little flow on. And to me, especially in South Africa, it's one of the reasons why we have such a big attritional rate, is because we focus on the outcome far too early. New Zealand doesn't have this. New Zealand, as a rugby nation, they get bigger numbers as you get higher up. So when you look at sort of high school level and then into club rugby far exceeds the number of high school rugby sides. If you look at it in South Africa, it's totally the opposite. So our numbers in primary school are as big as they're ever going to get. In high school, they get less. And in club, I mean, that's why our club system is really struggling. Because I think our high schools are focusing too much on the performance aspect and on that first year.
But I think I'm going to play devil's advocate here, because the difficult part, while that might be our feeling, is that if one school has a high performance center and is pushing it, and players get into provincial teams, it's really difficult to get into any form of provincial or representative teams the older you get. And it probably is, we need to look at those systems and revisit them, because I think that is a big problem. So that's why kids are specializing early, because you want to make that under 13 provincial team. Because if you don't make that team, to get in at under 15 is really difficult, and under 19 is virtually impossible. So that is one of the reasons I think why schools and kids and parents are pushing, is because I think that whole system of trying to go professional or to try and take your sport as far as you can is quite flawed. So I think it needs a whole rework by like sporting bodies. And then I think a number of schools are trying to look at it and trying to balance it. And if they have a multi-sport athlete or an athlete that is in a number of different sports or different levels of games, so first team and provincial and whatever, that they are trying to protect those athletes. And that's sort of something we are trying to get a lot more involved in, is trying to protect those athletes, make sure that they're not overtrained, not overreaching, and going to get that catastrophic injury that rules them out. So I think if schools are going to persist with those high performance, and I don't see anybody putting aside like their first team rugby squad and trying to get them to do as best as they can, we just need to make sure that the protection and the preventative measures are there to try and protect the athletes.
Okay, Cass. We have gone quite a bit over our hour and a half. Are you still there, Cass?
Yes, I'm here.
So I see that quite a few participants have thanked us for what we've actually done, and thanked us for today. We did have a couple more slides on the Olympics and what we expected from the Olympics and things like that. However, all these video clips are all on our website, not our website, on our YouTube channel. So if you go to Intune.com on YouTube, you can actually watch them all, and a lot of little snippets are in tune with coaching, our Instagram account. And in Intune.com, we also, if you don't get the emails, well, you will get the emails since you've registered for today. You can still see what other events we're actually busy with and what other talks we're actually having. Cass, I think we're quite a bit over our time limit today. Is there anything else you would like to play for the moment before we move on, before we say goodnight to everyone?
End it off. No, I just want to thank all the coaches and everybody else on here, because we've got some people on the Zoom call and we've got some people on our website. And most of the school coaches are all on our website because of the way the cost and that of streaming and that. But to all of you, I thank you sincerely for supporting us over the year. In fact, it's actually been a year and a half. And we just from our side, we remain committed to you all, to helping you upskill. And I must tell you, looking at all those little snippets, it just reiterates what amazing webinars that we have had. So to all of you, we wish you the happiest of holidays. We will be sending out little things and little emails to you over the December holidays, because you might be going on holiday, but that doesn't mean to say that we are. So we'll just keep you updated on little things that we're doing, and things that are interesting, that we believe would be interesting for you. So from our side, we look forward to seeing you in 2022. And thank you for your support in 2021.
And definitely, if you've got some spare time over the Christmas period, please go through to our YouTube channel and watch all these videos. You can watch them as many times as you like, what you like. And it's not only this last year's videos we've got on, we also go back to the previous year, where I see Mr. Roland Butcher's on today, and his, for example, his speech and his webinar is also on. So go back to our YouTube channel and enjoy all the content that we've got, and enjoy everything that we've done over the last 2 years. So thank you very much for everybody, and have a fantastic evening, everyone.
Happy holidays. Bye-bye.